So I want to try to reduce the hanger roll on this board, which was what was happening, where it's kind of side loading, and you move the load sideways, it causes the hanger to kind of just roll sideways regardless of what the rider is trying to make it do, and that's not good. So I want to fight that, and I also want to make the board more stable. And one of the ways I can do that is by dropping the roll axis of the deck. And to drop the roll axis, the easiest way to do that is to reduce the rake, or even to have a negative rake. So before I go and building and making a game plan of how I want to build this next revision, I want to do a little bit of experimentation along those lines to see if I like the feel of negative rake for a mountain board. Because the reason why I'm so reluctant is because I really like the liveliness of, you know, like TKPs and raked setups, and if I go rakeless or negative rake, I'm afraid that that's gonna deaden the feel too much. However, even if it does that on a longboard, that might not necessarily be the case for a mountain board, because of just how crazy the movement of the ground underneath the wheels is. It might still be a benefit. So to that end, I've constructed one of my kooky, crazy setups that I do. And what I've done is I've put my Rojas on here, and I've got as big a wheels as I can fit onto the hangers. I do have 8-inch scooter wheels, but the hub is too wide and there's not enough thread. So unfortunately, I couldn't get the exact same size wheels on the Rojas. But I did get very large wheels, and I want to experiment with flipping the Rojas. So the Roja has a decent amount of rake or offset, and right now it's configured so it's got negative rake. And basically, I want to I took the resistance off so that the resistance isn't deadening the feel of what the geometry is doing. So I can really feel what's going on. I do have to have resistance on the rear, but I'm leaving the front loose. And I'm going to try back and forth what the positive rake feels like and what the negative rake feels like. And I'm going to try to determine if this negative rake is workable for this mountain board setup. So I've taken a bit of a detour on my way back from work, and taken the pass through the mountains instead. And I'm gonna be testing out this little stretch of gravel road here and trying this thing out. So I'm gonna start off with the negative rake. All right, so we'll give this a go and try to get a feel for what these hangers are doing. So that was the flipped hangers. So this is the unflipped. Oh. I think that actually felt better. It's taller and it's more tippy, but somehow it still feels more controllable. Even though by all means it should be less stable. But yeah, I'm gonna have to give it a couple goes without the camera and do some runs back and forth, and I'll see what I think after putting a little bit of more time on this little stretch of road. All right, so that's just about as slow as you can go. Really, I should be testing a little bit faster than that, but I can already tell quite a lot. And with the flipped hanger, the way it is right now, it definitely tracks straighter. It likes going straight. I can feel it. It just kind of wants to keep going straight. And it's definitely controllable. But with the positive rake and the hanger being the right side around, it's not any less controllable really, but it does invite you to come and carve with it. It wants you to do that. And so even though I can definitely see that it is mellowing out the board and making it more stable, I'm just really torn as to whether I want to have that or not. And I know that as I get going faster and faster, it's going to get more and more crazy, and I'll probably miss the rake less and less. So I do think I could definitely do rakeless, but negative rake I'm not sold on. But it is promising for being able to make the board recoverable when things get really wonky, and it'll just, you know, reset back to center for you without you having to do much. And I can definitely see scenarios mountain boarding where that would be so nice to have. So for now, I'm gonna load up and I'll think about it, the plan and the rake, and we'll see where I go. Okay, so I've put more time on this, and I've ridden it more. I've ridden on pavement, and I rode it more on the dirt, and I've had someone else ride it and tell me what they think. And we've all basically decided that the normal rake feels better. However, I also decided that the whole point of this setup was for experimentation and exploration, and, you know, it's no time not to be bold about it. So I've decided to do a little bit of negative rake on the front, just to try it. So this is where the wheels are going to be, and this is a roll axis. So you can see the rake on the rear here is a positive rake, and on here it's a negative rake in the other direction. And so the roll axis is downward sloping, which is not, I don't know how that's going to affect the feel, but you can visualize that a little bit. That, you know, if you imagine the roll axis as the tight rope that's happening under your feet, yeah, it slopes down towards the front. And yeah, so there's the axle height. So there's your level reference right there. And what I want to do with the deck is this. For the rear of the deck, I want to set it up so your rear foot is slightly below the roll axis. So you've got a bit of the hammocking feel of a really aggressive drop deck. Whereas at the front, the deck's above the roll axis, and so I'm visualizing this line as being the foot surface, not the bottom of the deck, but the foot surface where your feet are going to go. But I'm imagining that having some of that top mount leverage might bring some of the liveliness back to the front. In addition, I've noticed through all the footage and riding on the hill that it seems to be more difficult on the mountain board to keep your weight forward on the front truck. And that's necessary in order to keep the whole setup stable. And so I feel like it might be worthwhile to pitch the whole deck upward a little bit to make it easier to keep your weight forward. So what we end up here with this design and how I've got it planned out is you got a 42-degree pivot on the front. This is the angle of this slope relative to the ground plane. And in the rear, it's 25 degree. and I'd be running 0-degree base plates. So 42-degree turning on the front, 25 in the rear, but the pressed angle on the front would only be 40 degrees, and on the rear it's going to be 28. So 42 degrees is getting to be a lot to press into Baltic birch. I'm not sure if I'll be able. I'm confident I could do 30. 42 is I'm less confident about. But I can make the mold, and I do have maple on hand. So if I can't do it with the birch, I can do it with the maple. So as of right now, that is the plan, and I'm basically throwing all the radical things. Well, not all the radical things. There's one even more radical idea that I've come to, and that is I can replace this front truck because I want to do the narrow truck. That's kind of what's got me into this problem of the hanger roll in the first place, is trying to do the narrow truck. Anyway, so I did all sorts of exploring around that, and I came to the realization that I can get around with some of the problems I'm running into trying to get a narrow hanger by simply doing a single wheel and more of a bicycle turning geometry than a skateboard turning geometry, and do a three-wheeler. So that's the most radical idea, and I do want to try it. But for this, I've not been shy about what the radical things I want to try on it are. I think the biggest issue in terms of making it work nicely is, so the truck height here is reasonable. I can build a truck to that axle height. This, however, on this side, this length is huge. 105 millimeters. That's over 4 inches. That's really, really tall, especially if I'm going to be making another planet type of truck. So this is going to have a big block riser or something to make this work. Some of the other design things I'm considering is trying to keep the hanger as narrow as possible on the front, but going wider on the rear, and just allowing the rear to be a bit wider. And I also thinking that a wider cam on the rear would be beneficial. I'm thinking like a 5-inch cam, and that's a big cam. The other thing is I want the deck lean to be a lot. I decided, at least for this stage, I'd rather get rail bite onto the dirt than to run out of lean. So I'm going to design in a ton of lean into these trucks, and I will tone it back later as needed, but for now it's all going to be available to play around with. So that is the plan. The next step is to I'm going to be designing the deck and making the mold and to begin pressing it. The next step after that is I'm going to be designing 0-degree other planet trucks to put on this thing. And I'm going to be 3D printing the hangers, and the base plates are going to be 90-degree aluminum angle stock. And that's all it will need to be. That is the plan, the timeline. I'm hoping next week have a press made. The week after that, hopefully I've got the trucks drafted, and somewhere in between that time, I'm hoping to have started pressing the deck. So that's a pretty aggressive timeline, especially for my track record, but we'll see how it goes. Longboard Technology, over and out.